Welcome to the Deep Sleep Channel. Tonight we're exploring one of the most haunting and mysterious stories in maritime history. A story about a ship. A story about a crew that vanished without a trace. A story about a vessel found drifting alone across the Atlantic Ocean. A story about a mystery so profound that over a century and a half later we still don't know what happened. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, a merchant ship that became a ghost ship, a floating tomb with no bodies, a vessel that was found in perfect condition, with food still warm in the galley, yet utterly abandoned. The Mary Celeste is perhaps the most famous maritime mystery in the world. It has inspired novels, films, and endless speculation, yet the truth remains elusive, hidden in the depths of the ocean, lost to history. On the morning of December 4th, 1872, a ship named the Dei Gratia spotted something strange on the horizon. It was another ship, sailing erratically with no apparent course or purpose. As the crew of the Dei Gratia approached, they realized that something was terribly wrong. The ship was the Mary Celeste, and it was empty. The crew had vanished. Every single person who had been aboard the Mary Celeste had disappeared without a trace. There were no bodies, there were no signs of struggle, there were no messages explaining what had happened. The ship's log ended abruptly, the crew's belongings remained in their quarters, food sat on the tables, yet there was no sign of the people who had called this ship their home. Close your eyes. Let yourself travel back in time. Let yourself step aboard the Mary Celeste on that fateful autumn day. Let yourself witness the moment of discovery. Let yourself wonder at the mystery that has puzzled investigators for more than 150 years. Let yourself drift into sleep, contemplating one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. This is a meditation on mystery, on loss, on the power of the unknown, and on the human desire to understand what cannot be easily explained. The fate one's gains, the Virginie. The 1869, after changing owners several times and sailing under various flags. The Mary Celeste was 103 feet long and weighed about 282 tons. By the standards of the time, she was a medium-sized merchant vessel designed to carry cargo across the Atlantic. The Mary Celeste had a modest crew. On the fateful voyage that led to her discovery, there were 13 people aboard. This included Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, the captain of the ship. It included his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia Matilda. It included the first mate, Albert Richardson. It included the second mate, Andrew Gilling. And it included 7 crew members, men whose names are now nearly forgotten by history. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs was the most important figure in the story of the Mary Celeste. Briggs was born into a seafaring family. His father, uncles and brothers were all ship captains. Seafaring was in his blood. He had commanded vessels before. He was experienced, skilled and respected. Briggs was also unusual for a sea captain of his time because he brought his family with him on his voyages. In the 19th century, many ship captains sailed alone, leaving their wives and children behind. But Briggs was a devoted family man. He brought his wife Sarah and his young daughter Sophia with him on many of his voyages. He wanted to share his life at sea with the people he loved most. On the morning of November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor. Her destination was Genoa, Italy. She was laden with a cargo of American alcohol, intended for the European market. The cargo was valuable. The voyage was routine. There was no reason to suspect that anything unusual would happen. The ship carried enough provisions for a voyage of several months. There was food in the galley. There was fresh water in the barrels. There were blankets, clothing, and all the supplies necessary for a long sea voyage. Everything was in order. Everything was prepared according to standard maritime practice. Captain Briggs kept a detailed log of his journey. The log recorded the weather conditions, the position of the ship, the state of the sails, and other details relevant to navigation. These logs are our window into the daily life aboard the Mary Celeste in those final days before the mystery began. The final days, the last entries in the ship's log. The Mary Celeste sailed out into the Atlantic Ocean in early November 1872. The voyage was uneventful at first. The sea was calm, the weather was clear, the ship made good progress toward her destination. The log entries from the first few weeks of the voyage are routine. Fair weather, good sailing conditions, crew in good spirits. These are the kinds of entries that captains made dozens of times, recording days that passed without incident. But as the Mary Celeste sailed further into the Atlantic, conditions began to change. The weather grew rougher. The sea became more turbulent. This was not unusual for the Atlantic in autumn. Storms were common. High seas were expected. On November 20th, the log records stronger winds. The ship was sailing under reduced sail, the sails partially furled to prevent damage in the stronger wind. This was standard procedure. Every experienced sailor knew how to handle rough seas. On November 24th, the log records that the Mary Celeste encountered rough weather. The ship was tossed by waves. The wind howled through the rigging. The crew worked to maintain their course and keep the ship steady. But there is nothing unusual in these entries. The weather was bad, but not catastrophic. Ships encountered storms all the time. Then, on November 25th, something changed. The log entry for that date is less detailed. It suggests that Captain Briggs may have been distracted or preoccupied. What was on his mind? Was he concerned about the weather? Was he worried about something he had observed? Did he suspect something was wrong? We will never know, because the log entries end on November 25th. The next day, the ship is silent. There is no log entry for November 26th. There is no record of what happened to the Mary Celeste on that day. In fact, the log entries do not continue at all. No one ever made another entry. No one ever recorded what happened. The log stops abruptly, leaving investigators to wonder what catastrophe occurred between November 25th and the morning of December 4th, when the ship was discovered. What happened during those 9 days? What event was so terrible, so sudden, so incomprehensible that every person aboard the Mary Celeste vanished without leaving a trace? The Dei Gratia finds the ghost ship. Imagine, if you will, the perspective of the crew aboard the Dei Gratia on the morning of December 4th, 1872. The Dei Gratia was also a merchant ship, sailing from New York to Gibraltar. She was another small brigantine, similar to the Mary Celeste in many ways. The crew of the Dei Gratia were experienced sailors. They had seen many things in their years at sea. They had encountered storms and calm weather. They had seen whales and other creatures of the deep. They had crossed the Atlantic countless times. They were used to the solitary stretches of open ocean, where the only sight for hundreds of miles was water and sky. But on the morning of December 4th, something appeared on the horizon that was out of the ordinary. It was another ship. As the Dei Gratia drew closer, the crew could see that the ship was moving strangely. She was not following a consistent course. She seemed to be drifting. The ship was the Mary Celeste. The crew of the Dei Gratia recognized her because they had been in port in New York at the same time, and they had heard of the Mary Celeste. She was a well-known vessel, but something was clearly wrong. The Mary Celeste was not flying any signals. She was not responding to the standard hailing procedures that sailors use to communicate with other ships. The crew of the Dei Gratia sent up flags and signals, trying to make contact with the Mary Celeste, but there was no response. Growing concerned, the captain of the Dei Gratia decided to send over a small boat with a few crew members to investigate. 3 men rowed across the water and climbed aboard the Mary Celeste. What they found was a ship that was utterly abandoned. There was no one on deck. There was no one in the rigging. There was no one visible anywhere on the ship. The crew of the Dei Gratia searched the ship from bow to stern. They went down into the crew's quarters. They searched the captain's cabin. They looked everywhere that a person might hide, but they found no one. And yet, the ship was not damaged. The sails were partially furled, as if they had been deliberately arranged. The ship's cargo was intact. The ship's supplies were all accounted for. Food sat on the tables in the galley, partially eaten. The ship was floating peacefully, as if it had been waiting for someone to discover it. The crew of the Dei Gratia made careful notes of what they found. They documented the state of the ship. They catalogued the cargo. They examined the crew's quarters, and they found many things that suggested that the Mary Celeste had been abandoned in haste. The captain's bed was unmade, as if he had recently gotten out of it. Sarah Briggs's sewing was left on a table, unfinished, as if she had set it down just moments before. Sophia's toys were scattered about. In the galley, there was a meal partially prepared. Most significantly, the ship's lifeboat was missing. One of the ship's boats was gone, and investigators could see marks on the ship's rail that suggested the lifeboat had been hastily lowered into the water. Had the crew abandoned ship voluntarily? Had something caused them to take to the lifeboat? But if they had abandoned ship, where were they? No bodies were ever found. No lifeboat was ever discovered drifting on the ocean. The investigation, searching for answers. Once the discovery of the Mary Celeste became known, it became a sensation. A ship found drifting, completely abandoned, with no explanation. The mystery captured the imagination of the public. Newspapers ran stories about the ghost ship. People speculated about what could have happened. Investigators were assigned to examine the Mary Celeste. They wanted to understand what had occurred. They wanted to determine whether a crime had been committed. They wanted to find any clues that might explain the disappearance of the crew. The investigation revealed many details about the state of the ship. The ship's logbook was examined closely. The entries showed that the last entry was on November 24th, not November 25th as initially thought. This meant that the crew had been missing for at least 9 days before the ship was discovered. The ship's stores of food and water were examined. They appeared to be intact. There was enough food and water for the entire crew to have survived for many weeks. This suggested that the crew had not abandoned ship due to lack of supplies. The ship's cargo was examined. The alcohol that the ship was carrying was valuable. Could thieves have stolen the ship? Could the cargo have been the motive? But the cargo appeared to be untouched. Nothing was missing. The cargo hatch had been opened, but the alcohol was still there. The ship's sails were examined. They had been unfurled as if someone had deliberately raised them. The ship had been put on a course, as if someone had deliberately set her direction. This suggested that whoever abandoned the ship had taken time to adjust the sails and set a course. But why? If something terrible was happening, why would someone take the time to adjust the sails before abandoning ship? This question troubled investigators. It suggested that the abandonment was not a panicked flight from imminent danger. It suggested that whoever left the ship was methodical and deliberate. The ship's rope was examined. One of the ship's rails had what appeared to be marks from a rope. Investigators concluded that a lifeboat had been lowered from the ship using ropes attached to the rail, but the lifeboat itself was never found. In the weeks and months following the discovery of the Mary Celeste, the investigation revealed very little. There were no bodies, there were no messages, there were no clear explanations. The salvage crews who were sent to retrieve the Mary Celeste and bring her back to port found nothing new. They searched the ship thoroughly. They examined the cargo hold. They looked in every corner and crevice, but they found no evidence of what had happened. One fact that would have been significant was if there had been any blood found aboard the ship. Blood would have suggested violence or injury, but no blood was found. The ship appeared to have been abandoned voluntarily, not as a result of a disaster or attack. Theories and speculation. What could have happened? In the years following the discovery of the Mary Celeste, many theories emerged to explain what had happened to the crew. Some theories were sensible and grounded in maritime knowledge. Others were wild speculations that stretched the bounds of credibility. One prominent theory suggested that the crew had attacked the ship or its crew. A more plausible theory suggested that the ship had encountered a severe storm. The storm had been violent enough to cause the crew to fear for their lives. In a panic, they had lowered the lifeboat and abandoned ship. But the storm had passed quickly, leaving the Mary Celeste undamaged. The lifeboat, meanwhile, had been carried away by currents, and all the crew members had drowned or been lost at sea. This theory made sense in several ways. It explained why the crew would abandon a seaworthy ship. It explained why no bodies were found. They would have been lost at sea. It explained why the ship was relatively undamaged. The crew had abandoned ship before any serious damage occurred. But it still left many questions unanswered. Why would experienced sailors panic in a storm? Why would they abandon a ship that was not in immediate danger? Another theory, popular among those who had heard the story but may not have been familiar with maritime practices, suggested that Captain Briggs had gone mad. In this theory, Briggs had become violent or delusional. He had murdered the crew or driven them mad. But this theory was contradicted by all available evidence. Briggs was not known to be a violent man. He had a devoted family. He was respected by his crew, and there was no evidence of violence aboard the ship. A more sinister theory suggested that there had been a mutiny. The crew had rebelled against the captain and had thrown him and the officers overboard. Then, overwhelmed with guilt or fear of punishment, they had taken to the lifeboat and rowed away, intending to fabricate a story about what had happened. But this theory was also problematic. Why would an experienced crew mutiny for no reason? And if there had been a mutiny, why would all 13 people disappear? At least one survivor would be expected to tell the story. Some people speculated that the Mary Celeste had been deliberately abandoned as part of an insurance fraud scheme. Maybe the crew had deliberately sunk a different ship and made it look like the Mary Celeste had gone down, then the crew had claimed the insurance money. But this theory did not fit the facts. The Mary Celeste had been found intact, she had not sunk, and there was no evidence of any insurance scheme. Yet another theory, which emerged from reports that may or may not have been accurate, suggested that the crew had encountered a ship with a disease aboard. In a panic, fearing contagion, they had abandoned the Mary Celeste to avoid infection. This theory sounds more like a plot from a novel than a realistic historical event. The most widely accepted theory among maritime historians today suggests a combination of factors. The ship encountered a leak, not a serious leak, but a leak that caused the crew to become concerned. Perhaps the alcohol cargo was leaking from its barrels and mixing with the water, or perhaps the ship had sprung a leak from impact with underwater debris. In any case, the crew became concerned about the ship's seaworthiness. Captain Briggs, a cautious and protective man, decided to lower the lifeboat as a precaution. Perhaps he intended to wait and observe whether the leak worsened. Perhaps he thought it would be safer to stay nearby in the lifeboat until he determined whether the ship was in real danger. But something went wrong. Perhaps a sudden swell or a shift in the current separated the lifeboat from the ship. Perhaps the lifeboat drifted away faster than expected. In any case, the lifeboat became separated from the Mary Celeste. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the ship was too far away to reach. The crew in the lifeboat would have been trapped. They had no way to reach the ship. The Mary Celeste, meanwhile, would have continued to float. The leak would have been minor enough not to sink the ship. The ship would have drifted across the Atlantic, ultimately to be discovered by the Dei Gratia. This theory is plausible. It explains many of the facts. It explains why experienced sailors would abandon the ship they were concerned about a leak. It explains why the ship was relatively undamaged, the leak was minor. It explains why no bodies were found, the crew drowned in the lifeboat, far from any recovery site. But it is still just a theory. We will never know for certain what happened. The truth went down with the lifeboat, lost in the vast Atlantic Ocean. The fate of the Mary Celeste, a ship cursed by mystery. After the Mary Celeste was discovered, she was salvaged and brought back to port. She was returned to her owners. But the mystery of her discovery had made her famous, and perhaps infamous. She was now known as a ghost ship, a vessel upon which something terrible had happened. The Mary Celeste continued to sail. She was sold several times, changing owners repeatedly. Ships that are associated with death and disaster are often considered unlucky. Sailors are superstitious people. Many would have been reluctant to sail aboard a ship with such a dark history. The Mary Celeste was used for many different purposes. She was used as a merchant vessel, carrying cargo across the Atlantic. She was eventually purchased by a group of businessmen who, it is said, deliberately planned to wreck the ship and claim the insurance money. In a final twist of irony, the ship sank before they could complete their plan, wrecked on a reef near Haiti. In a way, it seemed fitting that the Mary Celeste, having already been surrounded by mystery and death, would meet an ignominious end. The ship that had vanished into mystery would eventually disappear into the depths of the ocean, leaving nothing behind but legend. Today, the Mary Celeste exists only in memory and imagination. But her story endures. It has been told and retold for more than a century and a half. It has inspired novels and films. It has sparked endless speculation and debate. Few ships in history have achieved the level of fame that the Mary Celeste enjoys, and all of it is based on a single, terrible mystery. The human element, the people who were lost. When we think about the Mary Celeste, we often focus on the ship, the cargo, the mystery of the disappearance. But we should also remember the people who were aboard. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs was an accomplished sailor, a skilled navigator, and a devoted family man. He brought his wife and young daughter with him on his voyages because he wanted to share his life at sea with the people he loved. He was respected by his crew. He was known as a fair and capable captain. We know very little about him, but from the few records that survive, we know that he was a man of intelligence, principle, and compassion. Sarah Briggs was his wife. She was not content to stay at home while her husband sailed. She wanted to be with him, to share his adventures and his life at sea. This was unusual for women of her time. Most women did not travel with their husbands on merchant voyages, but Sarah Briggs was not a conventional woman. She was brave and adventurous. She had chosen a life at sea alongside the man she loved. Sophia Matilda was their daughter. She was only 2 years old. She had never known a life on land. Her entire world was the ship. She knew her parents, the crew, the sea, the sky. She had no other reference point. To her, the Mary Celeste was home. We do not know much about the crew members. Their names are known from the ship's records, but little else survives about them. We know that they were men who had chosen a dangerous and difficult profession. Sailors of that era lived precarious lives. They faced dangers from storms, from disease, from injury. They lived in cramped quarters with limited supplies of fresh food and fresh water. Scurvy, a disease caused by lack of vitamin C, was common among sailors on long voyages. Dysentery and other diseases spread quickly in the unsanitary conditions of a ship. Despite these hardships, many men chose a life at sea. For some, it was because they had no other options. For others, it was because they loved the freedom of the sea, the adventure of long voyages, the fellowship of the crew. Sailors developed a culture and a camaraderie that was unique to their profession. The ocean in the 19th century was a mysterious place. Modern navigation technology did not exist. Ships relied on the sun, the stars, and the horizon to determine their position. A ship could become lost for weeks without realizing it. The ocean was vast, empty, and often dangerous. Maritime mysteries were more common in this era than they are today. Ships disappeared without explanation. Entire crews vanished. Ghost ships were sometimes encountered drifting across the ocean with no sign of their crew. But the Mary Celeste stands out among all these mysteries because of the specific circumstances of her discovery. The Mary Celeste was not a wrecked ship. She was not severely damaged. She was not sinking. She was sailing peacefully across the ocean, with all her cargo intact, with food still on the tables, with no sign of violence or catastrophe. And yet her entire crew had vanished. This combination of factors made the Mary Celeste unique. It was not a disaster. It was a mystery, a complete, inexplicable mystery. The power of the unknown. Why the mystery endures. More than a century and a half has passed since the Mary Celeste was discovered. Advanced technology has made the ocean safer and better understood. Modern maritime investigations are far more thorough and scientific than they were in 1872, and yet the mystery of the Mary Celeste remains unsolved. Why does this mystery continue to fascinate us? What is it about the Mary Celeste that captures the imagination in a way that other maritime disasters do not? Perhaps it is because the mystery is so complete. With a shipwreck, there is a cause and effect that we can understand. A ship encounters a storm. The ship is damaged. The ship sinks. There is a logical progression. There are bodies. There is evidence. We can understand what happened. But the Mary Celeste offers no such understanding. The ship did not sink. The crew did not die in a documented way. There was no fire, no explosion, no collision. There was simply a vanishing. 13 people disappeared, leaving behind no explanation, no bodies, no clear evidence. This complete absence of explanation is what makes the Mary Celeste so mysterious. In a world where we are accustomed to answers, where science and technology have made many mysteries solvable, the Mary Celeste stands as a reminder that some mysteries remain unsolved. Some questions have no answers. The mystery also touches on our deepest fears. The idea of a ship found empty, with no explanation for what happened to the crew, taps into our fear of the unknown. It suggests that there are forces in the world that we do not understand and cannot control. It suggests that disaster can strike without warning, for no apparent reason. There is also a poignant element to the mystery. A family was aboard the ship. A man, his wife, and his small child. These were not just names in a logbook. These were people. They had relationships, emotions, hopes, and dreams. To think that they disappeared without a trace, that no one will ever know what happened to them, is deeply moving. The mystery of the Mary Celeste is, ultimately, a mystery about human loss. It is a story about people who vanished. It is a reminder that life is fragile, that disaster can come without warning, and that some mysteries will never be solved. Contemplations on mystery and the unknown. As we drift into sleep, contemplating the story of the Mary Celeste, we contemplate the meaning of mystery in our lives. First, we contemplate the limits of human knowledge. For all our advances in science and technology, there remain mysteries that we cannot solve. The Mary Celeste reminds us that the world is still capable of keeping secrets. There are still questions to which we may never know the answers. This can be humbling. It can remind us of the vastness of the unknown. Second, we contemplate the human desire for explanation. We are driven to understand the world around us. When something mysterious happens, we want to know why. We construct theories. We search for evidence. We debate and argue about possible explanations. The Mary Celeste has inspired countless theories over the years. Some of these theories are plausible. Others are wild speculations. But all of them reflect our deep desire to understand. Third, we contemplate the power of loss. The Mary Celeste represents a loss. 13 people disappeared. A ship became a ghost ship. A mystery was created that would fascinate people for generations. The loss is not just the loss of the 13 people, though that is profound. It is also the loss of knowledge. We lost the opportunity to know what happened. We lost the testimony of the people involved. We lost the truth. Fourth, we contemplate the fragility of life at sea. Sailors have always known that the ocean is dangerous. They have always understood that death is a possibility when you venture onto the water. The Mary Celeste is a reminder of this danger. Even a well-maintained ship with an experienced crew can be the scene of tragedy. The ocean remains a place of mystery and danger. Fifth, we contemplate the relationship between evidence and truth. We are accustomed to believing that if we have enough evidence, we can determine the truth. We believe in science. We believe in investigation. We believe that mysteries can be solved. The Mary Celeste challenges this belief. Here is a ship with substantial evidence remaining. The ship herself is evidence. The logbook is evidence. The arrangement of the cargo is evidence. The lifeboat's absence is evidence. But despite all this evidence, we cannot determine the truth. Some mysteries remain beyond our reach. Sixth, we contemplate the power of story. The Mary Celeste has become a legend. The true story has been embellished over the years. Novels and films have added details that were never documented. The actual Mary Celeste has been transformed into a myth. This transformation reflects something important about human nature. We need stories. We need narratives that help us make sense of the world. When reality is too mysterious, we create stories to fill the gaps. The ship itself, a meditation on objects and meaning. The Mary Celeste herself is worth contemplating. She was a ship made of wood and rope and canvas. She was constructed by human hands. She was designed to float, to withstand the ocean, to carry cargo and people across vast distances. But after her discovery, the Mary Celeste became more than just a ship. She became a symbol. She became a manifestation of mystery. The physical ship was just wood and rope, but the idea of the Mary Celeste was something much greater. This is true of many objects from history. An object becomes significant not just because of its material properties, but because of the meaning we assign to it. The Mary Celeste would be just another merchant vessel if she had been found with her crew intact. But because her crew vanished, the ship became legendary. We do this with many objects. A building becomes significant not just because of its architecture, but because of the events that occurred within it. A work of art becomes significant not just because of its physical properties, but because of the ideas and emotions it evokes. Objects become repositories of meaning. The Mary Celeste is a repository of meaning. She embodies mystery. She represents the unknown. She symbolizes loss and the limits of human understanding. When we think of the Mary Celeste, we are thinking not just of a ship, but of a concept. Yet the actual Mary Celeste was just a ship. She was built, sailed, and eventually wrecked. She was used for practical purposes. She had no inherent significance. The significance we assign to her is something we create, something we project onto her. This is a profound truth. The meaning of an object does not come from the object itself, it comes from us. We look at the world and find meaning in it. We tell stories about objects and events. The stories become real to us, even if we do not know the truth. The Mary Celeste, in this sense, is a perfect symbol for the power of human imagination. A mysterious ship has become a legendary ship. The legend is more real to most people than the actual ship ever was. Vast, deep, and unknowable. To understand the Mary Celeste, we must understand the ocean. The ocean is the setting for this mystery. It is the stage upon which this drama was played out. The ocean is vast. It covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface. It is deeper than mountains are tall. It contains more life forms than any other environment on Earth. And yet we know less about the ocean than we know about outer space. Large sections of the ocean floor remain unmapped. New species are discovered in the ocean every year. The ocean is also deep. The average depth of the ocean is about 12,000 feet. In the deepest places, the ocean is nearly 7 miles deep. In these depths, there is no light. There is tremendous pressure. There is a cold that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The Mary Celeste sailed across the surface of this vast, deep, unknowable ocean. The ship was small. The ocean was immense. From the perspective of the ocean, the Mary Celeste was nothing, insignificant, a speck of wood and canvas floating on the surface of an endless expanse. The crew of the Mary Celeste knew the ocean. They had sailed it many times. They understood its moods and its dangers. But they did not truly understand it. No one does. The ocean remains in many ways as mysterious as it was in ancient times. When the crew of the Mary Celeste abandoned ship, whether by choice or by force, they were abandoning themselves to the mercy of the ocean. Whether they were in a lifeboat or in the water itself, they were at the mercy of currents and winds and waves. The ocean would carry them where it willed. The ocean would determine their fate. Perhaps this is what makes the Mary Celeste so powerful. It is a mystery without a resolution. It is a question without an answer. In a world where we expect to find answers, where we are accustomed to being able to look things up and find information, the Mary Celeste stands as a reminder that some things will remain unknown. The question, what happened, will never be fully answered. We can speculate, we can theorize, but we cannot know. And in that not knowing, there is a kind of poetry. There is a reminder that the world is not fully knowable. There are limits to human understanding. The legacy of the Mary Celeste, a story that endures. The Mary Celeste was discovered in 1872. She sank in 1885. The actual ship has been gone for more than 130 years. The people aboard have been dead for more than 150 years. And yet the story endures. The Mary Celeste has become immortal, in a way. The actual ship has long since rotted away or been destroyed, but the legend of the Mary Celeste lives on. This is the power of story. A narrative that captures the imagination can outlast the physical reality. A mystery can become more real, more significant, more enduring than the actual events. The Mary Celeste has inspired countless works of fiction. Novels have been written imagining what happened. Films have dramatized the discovery. Documentaries have investigated the mystery. The Mary Celeste has become a cultural touchstone, a reference point that people recognize even if they know little about the actual history. This is fitting in a way. A mystery deserves to be remembered. The disappearance of 13 people deserves to be remembered. The story of Captain Briggs and his family, of the crew of the Mary Celeste, deserves to endure. The Mary Celeste will be remembered as long as people are interested in mysteries and maritime history. The ship has become a legend, and legends are immortal. The physical ship may be gone, but the story of the Mary Celeste will never die. Final meditation, the mystery remains. As we drift deeper into sleep, contemplating the story of the Mary Celeste, we contemplate the enduring power of mystery. The Mary Celeste is not the only mystery in history. There are countless mysteries. There are questions that have puzzled humanity for thousands of years. Some mysteries are eventually solved. Scientific discoveries answer questions that seemed unanswerable. Investigations uncover facts that were hidden. But some mysteries remain unsolved. The Mary Celeste is one of these enduring mysteries. More than 150 years have passed since her discovery. Countless theories have been proposed. Investigations have been conducted. And yet the truth remains hidden. There is something humbling about this. It reminds us that for all our knowledge and technology, there are still things that we do not understand. There are still secrets that the world keeps from us. There are still questions to which we may never know the answers. But there is also something comforting about this. It reminds us that the world is not completely knowable. There are still mysteries. There is still wonder. There is still the possibility of the unknown. The Mary Celeste, in her mystery, offers us a gift. She offers us a reminder that life is strange and wonderful and often inexplicable. She reminds us that the universe is vast and that our knowledge is small. She reminds us that there is more to the world than what we can see and understand. Sleep knowing that the Mary Celeste remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Sleep knowing that 13 people vanished without explanation, and we will likely never know what happened to them. Sleep knowing that the ocean still keeps its secrets. Sleep knowing that there are mysteries that no amount of investigation can fully solve. Sleep peacefully, contemplating the power of the unknown. Sleep knowing that mystery has value. Sleep knowing that not everything needs to be explained or understood. Sleep with the awareness that Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, his daughter Sophia Matilda, and the crew of the Mary Celeste remain in our memory. Though we do not know their fate, they are not forgotten. Their mystery endures, and in that endurance they are immortal. Sleep knowing that the Mary Celeste drifted across the Atlantic, empty and silent, a ghost ship carrying with her the greatest maritime mystery in history. Sleep knowing that she was discovered on a December morning, and that her discovery would fascinate people for generations to come. Sleep knowing that some mysteries should not be solved, should not be explained away. Some mysteries should simply be pondered, contemplated, and wondered at. Good night from the Deep Sleep Channel. Sleep well, and dream of the Mary Celeste. Sleep well and contemplate the mysteries of history. Sleep well and appreciate the power of the unknown. Sleep well and remember that the past holds secrets that time will never fully reveal. Sleep peacefully, knowing that in a world of answers, mysteries still exist, and perhaps that is how it should be. The Mary Celeste remains a symbol of mystery, of loss, and of the vast unknowable world that still exists beyond our understanding. This is the Deep Sleep Channel. We wish you restful sleep and pleasant dreams of mysteries yet unsolved.